So I'm doing the spreadsheets question from Summer 11, question paper 31. I'm going to do the whole question because this was quite a difficult one and there were a few tricky things in there. So the first thing I've done, I've already gone ahead and created the evidence file, put my details in the header. The next thing I want to do is I've loaded the file. I've just put my details in the header and the automated file name and path in the footer. So insert header and footer. Oh, I've already done it. You just type it in, okay? Right, so if I just scroll down now to my footer, I'll just delete this and show you how to add it in. Okay, so for the file name and path, you just need to click on file path because if you notice, it's got path and file, okay? If you're not sure, then just click on the file and you'll have two occurrences of the file name. It's fine, you won't lose any marks for that. So once I click off of that, you'll see that the information's there. So you'll see the file name is in there twice. Don't worry about it. Maybe what I would suggest actually is just put a space here, just to differentiate the path and the file from each other. So it's then like that. Yeah, I think that's the way to go forward with the evidence for this. If you want to change the view, if you don't like that view, then just go to view and normal and it will just go back. You won't be able to see the header and footer, but it's fine. Then you go to print, preview, you'll be able to see the header and the footer there as you put it in, okay? Right. This question was asking you to search the internet to find these records for the shot put, the Olympic records. I've already put that information in B3 to F4, so I will just show you that. So from B3, so it's here, the names, the country, the distance, it says should have been formatted to 2 decimal places with the year and the city. Okay, so it's possible that you might have to do a bit of internet research in a spreadsheets question. It happens occasionally, not very often, and I hope it doesn't happen. Right, so the next thing you had to do for question 6 is to print only cells A1 to F4. So that's basically printing a selection is how I do it. So A1 to F4, I'll just highlight. And then if I go to print selection and preview, you'll see that that is the only thing. Now, if you find that the data's not fully visible here, I've already clicked it here, but if you click on show margins, you can then adjust your margins in the print preview to ensure that everything's visible, just in case you have any issues with your column widths. And then obviously make sure your information's in the header and the footer. Then it says for question 7, it says to use a lookup function to show the country name in full. Okay, so if I just go back to the spreadsheet, so we have nothing there at the moment, and here's our code. Now, the questions in the Cambridge exam are normally worded in kind of a misleading way. So it says use the code column. Please remember that doesn't mean to highlight the whole column. With a lookup function, the lookup value is one cell that's related to that particular record. So for this particular question, this is my lookup value, C8, is this code here. Okay, do not highlight the whole column, that's not right. And it says that we need to use this file for our array or table, our lookup table. And it says the function should include both absolute and relative cell referencing and not a named range. So you're always given a hint as to whether you have to use absolute referencing or a named range. Okay, so I've got the actual spreadsheets file open with my lookup table. So I'm just going to go to view and arrange all. Okay, that was great. Oh, okay, just maximize both. Do it again. Okay. Right, so here is where my lookup's going to go. So obviously this is a vertical table, so I'm doing a VLOOKUP. I'm just going to put in equals VLOOKUP. Open my bracket. So my lookup value is the code, just that value only. and then I put a comma and a space, and then I have to put in my table array, which is here. It doesn't matter if you highlight the headings or not. It won't, because it's a lookup, it's comparing values, so it really makes no difference. I'm just going to highlight the values from here. And the important thing with opening both files and doing it like this is that it automatically will add in your absolute cell referencing. So it's one less thing for you to think about. So that's actually a mark. You'll get a mark for doing nothing really, because Excel's doing it for you. So you're utilising the functions in there. The next thing is the column index number, which will be 2, because we've got to extract the country name. We've already got the code, so we need the country name. So that's in the second column. So we're going to put a 2 in. Now, when we're doing an exact match, we can just close our formula here, or our function here. We don't need to put in true. If we're doing a calculation, if Excel needs to calculate and estimate what lookup value to put in into our cell, then we need to set it as true. If not, if it's an exact match, you don't need to put that part in. The last bit is actually optional. So all I need to do now is just move my cursor over here and just double click, and it will now add the country in for me. Okay. Right, so I've replicated my function. You get a mark just for replicating the function. So like I've already said, even if you get parts of the formula wrong, please make sure you're copying it down. There's a mark to be got for doing that. Okay, then it says in K8, use a function to select and display the longest of 6 throws made by the athlete and replicate that function. So I've finished with this spreadsheet now, because I've finished my lookup. As I've told you before, don't close it, because then it will add the path of that file to your formula, which you don't want. It will make it really long. Just minimize it, and then just maximize this one, because this is one we're still working on. Okay, so if you notice, there are 6 throws here for each athlete. It's recorded the distance that they've thrown. NT stands for no throw. So if they've missed the throw or they didn't throw for any reason, it will be recorded as NT. So we need to get the best throw out of these 6. So we're basically looking for the largest value. So we'd use the max function. Yeah. So equals max. Highlight your range of throws and close bracket, and that's given me the largest one from there, and then I just copy that down. So that's that. So each athlete's best throw will now be here. So we're on question 9. It says in L8, use a function to add the distance of all the throws for this athlete. Ensure that the function does not include the distance if it is recorded as NT, which means no throw. If you get a question like this, you'd normally just use a sum function to add up. But the question is telling you to make sure you've acknowledged the fact that you don't want the function to include a no throw. So you have to use sum if. Okay, so it's a little bit, if your question is worded like this, you have to take into consideration all the wording of that question. So it is a sum if. So in here we need to do equals, and I'm actually going to use the effects button. Remember guys, the keyboard is a bit dodgy with the quote marks. So where you can, use the effects button, because it will add in your quotation marks, and it will minimize you having any errors or having any stress with having to call the teacher to figure out why your formula is not working. That's just a recommendation. So we're using sum if. Okay, so our range and our sum range in this example are going to be the same. So the range is all of our throws, not the best throw. You don't need to put. The criteria is not no throw. So to write not in Excel, you put your less than and greater than symbols together like that. That means not. Okay? And then no throw, you just put as NT. So that will add everything apart from the no throws. It's a bit of a silly question, because with a sum, you're only adding numerical values anyway. So if you did it without that, it would give you the same answer. But what Cambridge is trying to establish is that you know how to use this type of formula for this question. So you just have to do what they're asking for. Okay? If you do it the other way, you will still pick up some marks, but you won't get full marks for your answer. So if you can't remember how to do it the way you know how. And you'll probably, out of maybe 5 or 6 marks, get 3 or 4. And then our sum range, you don't actually have to put the sum range in because it's already calculated the total, as you can see here. But I'm just going to add it in because I think that's what Cambridge would want. So I'm going to put the sum range in as well, okay, which is the same. In some examples where you've got to look at a code and then add up a corresponding value, your range and sum range would be different. We've only got one range here, so that's why it's there twice. So if you press OK on that, it's now given us the total that they threw. Okay, then it says in cell M8, use a function to count the number of throws that were not recorded as NT. So again here, you have to use a function that excludes NT. So it's not a count function, it would be a count if function. Is everybody clear on that? Okay, so I'll just go ahead and do that. So in M8, so again, I'll use the effects button. Count if, and our range is our number of throws. Now, what do we need to do to this range before we've got to make it absolute? So highlight it and press F4. We're going to copy it down. And then our criteria is not NT. Okay. So that particular athlete didn't have any no throws. So there's 6 throws that is counted. Okay, what's happened there? Okay, there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What? Oh, do you know what? I'm such a drongo. We don't make that absolute. Sorry, guys. That's why it's not worked. And now this is in my video. Great. What's happened? Is it? Of course it is. I have to copy it down. Okay. Right. Don't make this, if you're watching this video, don't make these silly mistakes that your teacher's making. Alright, so, okay, so obviously our range needs to change according to the row it's on. So it's not absolute. Okay. Read the question. On the question, so on this question, if we have a look, it doesn't say anything about making it absolute there. So that, if it needs to be absolute, it will tell you. Okay, so just check the question if you're not sure. That's just me making a silly mistake. Okay, so that's how it should be. Alright, next question then is in M8, calculate the average throw length for only the throws where a distance was recorded. And it says, so we're just getting an average of all the throws. It says use the contents of L8 and M8 to help you. If you get a question like this, use the cells that they've asked you to use. That means that they want you to use those cells in your formula, if it's written like that. So we're basically using L8 and M8. So if we have a look at those, so L8 is here, M8 is here. So it's the total throws divided by the number of throws, isn't it? Give us the average. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. It also says round this value to 1 decimal place and then replicate. So if it says round this value, you have to use a formula here to round the value. Don't use the format cells option to give you the number of decimal places. It's hinting that you have to use that function. So, and how you'd write it, if you have to round something or you convert something to an integer, you use, it's in a logical fashion. So the round function would be on the outside because that happens last. Whatever's inside would happen first. It's the same as any mathematical equation. So I'm going to put equals round, open my bracket, and for the number, that's where I'm going to put my actual calculation. So it's L8 divided by M8, yeah? And then it's to 1 decimal place. Yeah, so we put in 1 and close the brackets. Okay, so it should be written like that. If you're asked to record the average as an integer, it would be exactly the same as the round. You just write ints instead of rounds in your formula there. Okay, we're almost there. And then it says that this was probably the most challenging part of the question. It says in 08, use a formula to display the word yes if the athlete's longest throw breaks the Olympic record, or display the word no if it doesn't. And it says, remember, there are 2 records, one for men and one for women. So we've got to consider what our test is. So what's the first thing that we need to check here? Anybody know? What's that? Yeah, so we're checking whether this record belongs to a male or female. Then once we've done that, we can then determine what calculation we need to perform, or what kind of if we need to have. So it was a little bit kind of unique, this if statement, because there were several things that were included. So I'm going to use the effects button because there's lots of brackets and things like that. Okay, so our test is if this cell here, so the gender, if D8 is equal to male, then, oh, sorry, I need to put that in quotes. That's why it's not working. Oops. Okay, so if that's equals to male, then, so if we go back to the question, it says that we should be checking their longest throw, whether it breaks the Olympic record or not. Okay, if it does, we should display yes. If it doesn't, we should display no. So it's one if statement. And where's this if statement going to go? Because if D8 is male, if it's true, then in this particular example, the value of true would be another if statement. So if it's male, then we are carrying out this if statement where we then compare the total thrown to the male's Olympic record. So we need to put in if, and we need to click on their longest throw, or best throw, sorry, not longest throw, is greater than, let me just check, did it say greater than, or it has to break it, so it's greater than, not equals to, greater than, and it's this value here. Then we want it to say yes. If not, we want it to say no. Okay? Okay, if DA is false, it's going to be, it could be anything else. Yeah, but in this case, it's only going to be female that will be written. So if that's false, we would then put in comparing it to the female records. Okay, so I'm just going to copy paste. In fact, no, let me not copy paste. Let me just write it in. So in this case, it's the same one. So if best throw, so best throw is greater than, and this time it will be the female record, which is D4. Yes, and if not, it will display no. So it's checking the gender, and then if the gender is male, it will carry out a particular if statement. If the gender is not male, so then it will be female, it will carry out another if statement. Okay, so it's a little bit different. I need to put quote marks around yes and no, otherwise it's going to give me an error. So I'll just do that now. Just remember that any criteria that you add, any worded criteria, must go in double quote marks. Oops. Right, let me just pause this for a minute. Are there any questions about this type of if statement? With if statements, potentially, you have to combine everything that you know. So your common sense, your sense of logic, and all of what you've learned. Potentially, you could get a nested formula that combines various things, like a Vlookup and a left function, which was in the recent exam. That was the recent resit exam. So you have to be flexible in the exam and be prepared for anything to come up, for you to have to combine different functions together in different ways. That's how you're going to be successful in this exam, if you're flexible. I'm just going to, I want to pause this video, that's why I'm like, what's that? Okay, right, let me just, oh, let's do this.